Well, good afternoon and welcome to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. You have tuned into our weekly call-in town hall and radio show the week after the election. I want to make sure that you all have the phone number because this is a town hall. It's 804-454-1366, 804-454-1366. You can ask your question right here, right now. I am, again, State Senator Amanda Chase. I'm your weekly radio show host. And, we've just, we're still trying to, for me personally, I'm still trying to recover from this past Tuesday's Election Day 2018. And what I want to talk about today is what I'm hearing in my office. I'm getting a number of constituents reaching out to me saying that they had a number of issues trying to vote at their voting precinct on Election Day. And I currently sit on Senate Privileges and Elections, which is a fancy way of saying I do all things elections on Election Day. And so I'm very concerned. I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to make sure their voice is heard on Election Day and that they are able to vote with no issues. So we're going to talk today about what really happened in the 7th Congressional District. I'm concerned that there was some voter issues and irregularities. In fact, state election officials say there were multiple irregularities. The worst that Dr. Clara Bell Wheeler, who is the first vice chairman of the Virginia State Board of Elections, says she has seen since she has served in that position, and she's actually going to come on the radio a little bit later, so you'll want to stay tuned for that. And I want to give an opportunity to you all who had those difficulties to call in today. There is a form that you need to fill out that will go to the State Board of Elections to voice your concern. And in addition, you are welcome to email my office, and I will also make sure that we do the correct follow-up to make sure that your voice is heard. We don't want a repeat of what happened this past Tuesday in Chesterfield. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I guess the big news and heartbreaking news for me personally, because Congressman Dave Brat is a very dear friend, not just my congressman, but just a really good person. I've known him for over a decade, and it's just heartbreaking to me that he's not going to return as our 7th District Congressional congressman. And, this ends a nearly 50-year streak of Republican control in Virginia's 7th Congressional District. Even Quentin Kidd, who's the director of the Wasson Center for Public Policy at Christopher Newport University, said, I think she beat Dave Brat. I don't think Dave Brat lost. Here's some interesting statistics for you. 2 years ago, Congressman Brat beat Democrat Eileen Bedell. I don't know if you remember that or not. That was in the 7th Henrico precincts, and he beat her by 1,723 votes. And in the Chesterfield precincts, he won by over 10,000 votes. But this past Tuesday, Spanberger won the 7th Henrico precincts by more than 20,000 votes, 20,100 votes, and in the Chesterfield precincts by more than 10,000 votes. So quite a bit of difference in just 2 years. And so we're going to talk about, and I want to get your opinion too, on why you think that is. I definitely have some definite opinions on that. Let's start with all the money, the outside money, the money that came in outside of Virginia to influence our elections here in Virginia. I just want to comment real quickly while we're on that point that I have continued. I put in legislation in my first year that, after watching some of the elections the year that it's particularly as it relates to Senator Sturdivant's race, whenever he ran for state senate, just all the money that came in from Bloomberg and others into his race. And I was just outraged that outside money could influence Virginia's rates, that was even legal, that was even allowed. And so what I soon found out whenever I submitted my bill is that money is considered by the courts as free speech. And so, I had the attorneys that were drafting my bill to say, well, Senator Chase, you can't you can't file legislation that says that you can to prohibit outside money coming in and influencing races. I said, why not? And they said, well, that's a violation of free speech rights. And I said, but they don't live in Virginia. They can't vote in Virginia. Why can they spend money in Virginia? And so got into an argument about the attorney and ultimately told her she needed to file the legislation anyway, and we could fight it out in the courts, whether it was constitutional or not. And unfortunately, that bill actually was defeated on the committee that I serve, Senate Privileges and Elections. And I'm hoping we have a new revelation, because I am going to actually introduce this year a constitutional amendment so that you all get to determine what you think about outside money coming into Virginia. And you will have the opportunity, if this passes, the House, the Senate, and the governor passes this into law, you will have the opportunity at the ballot to say, I don't want money to be considered a First Amendment right or a free speech. And so defeating the court's opinion about money. And I just think it's wrong. We should not be taking money from outside of Virginia, but that's just the way the rules are, and we need to work to change that. But that's the way the rules are now, and so that's where we are. So I'm working on that legislation coming up this year. Would love you to call your state senator, your member in the House, and tell them to support because this bill will go before the Privileges and Elections in both the House and the Senate, and I need you to tell your senator, your member in the House, to support my legislation. So anyway, so going back to the Spanberger, Brett, I keep calling her Spanberger, 7th Henrico. So we were talking about the margin that Brett had, 24,103 votes in the 8 rural counties, which he won, but it was not enough to offset Henrico and Chesterfield. And then we also saw Scott Miles eventually won by a narrow margin of 2,527 votes. And, you know, I grew up in Chesterfield. I've lived in Chesterfield since 1979, and it has always been a Republican stronghold. And now it's something that, you know, after watching Tim McPeters lose the Commissioner of Revenue race, I mean, this is the second time we've had a constitutional officer to win basically a countywide election, and there's a lot of concern there. Chesterfield Republicans, Chesterfield conservatives, you're going to see a big difference as we see more and more of the constitutional officers take over with the inexperience that they have. I mean, Scott Miles has never prosecuted a case in Chesterfield County. If you look at what happened with Jennifer Hughes, who is the Commissioner of Revenue, you see what happened a couple weeks ago whenever taxpayer ID and Social Security numbers were actually on the outside envelope for everyone to see their Social Security numbers. That's what happens when we bring inexperience into these positions. So Wednesday morning was a sad day. Congressman Bratt called Abigail Spanberger to concede. And I just want to take a minute to read a statement from Congressman Bratt. He said the voters of the 7th District came out in record numbers for a midterm election. While the registrars across the district are still reviewing the votes, it is looking like the voters have spoken in this race. In the face of millions and millions of dollars of money from around this country that poured into Virginia to attack my record, I stayed true to my principles and did what I told the voters I would do. I'm proud of what we did to get this economy moving again. Virginians have more money in their pockets and more job opportunities at higher wages. I am also proud of my work to stop online human trafficking and to fight back against the opioid epidemic. We are also rebuilding our military, giving them a much-needed raise, and have taken care of our veterans by improving their health care system. Despite the fact that media would not report it, this is the record of results, not resistance. I want to thank the thousands and thousands of volunteers and donors who work tirelessly and give sacrificially to support the principles of the Virginia Republican Creed and the conservative values of our founders like James Madison. We may not have won this election, but I am truly humbled by all the support I've received over the past 4 years from so many Virginians. Laura, Jonathan, Sophia, and I cannot thank you enough for all your hard work, your prayers, and your friendship. And that's, again, from Congressman Dave Bratt. We're getting ready to go to a break here in a minute, but I hope you will contact Congressman Bratt's office and thank him for his service and encourage him that he fought the good fight. And he was a great congressman for 4 years and endured such what I feel was unfair attack ads and just lying about his record. Just unbelievable. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. All right. Thanks for tuning in today to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. I'm your state senator here. Chesterfield, Colonial Heights, and Amelia are the areas that I represent. But I also sit on Senate Privileges and Elections, which is a committee that handles everything elections. And today we are discussing post-election irregularities that we saw on Election Day. And I myself was at some poll between 6:15 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. on Election Day, hopping from poll to poll. I spent a lot of time at my voting precinct, Bailey Bridge, but just visiting poll workers, thanking them for our election workers for being there, and the turnout was incredible. In fact, they were of the 76 voting precincts in Chesterfield. 60% of the county's more than 243,000 registered voters cast ballots on Tuesday. And to give you some type of threshold, there was a 75% turnout in the 2016 presidential election. That's a 15% increase over the turnout in the last midterm election in 2014. And we also had 6,000 new people registered to vote this year, which is more than 2 times the number of new registrants for the last midterm election. But we had a number of issues, and I want to thank Tara Carroll, who is the Chesterfield GOP chairwoman, for coming on the air today. I received a call from Tara around 5:30 on Election Day, and she asked me if I could please go to the Spring Run Elementary School, which is the Birkdale precinct, to see for myself what a cluster, for lack of a better word, is that was going on at that particular precinct. And Tara, I'm going to let you say in your own words what you firsthand witnessed at that precinct.
At that particular precinct? Thanks for having me on.
Yes.
I initially went to that precinct around 10 o'clock in the morning to distribute some more signs. And when I got there around 10 a.m., there were cars lined up in the tow-away zones. There was curbside voting going on, and people double parked behind the curbside voting. I had already had multiple reports of people saying they had waited in line for 2 to 2.5 hours at that one poll. It was just so inefficient and poorly run, and people saying that they had to leave because they had to get to work or they had to go back to work and they weren't sure if they were going to return. And then after I spoke with you, I returned to the poll prior to 7 p.m. at close time, and the lines were still around and snaking through the cafeteria and down the hallway. People were still entering. People were trying to get towed out of the mud because they had to park on the grass at the school.
And
so
let's
just
talk a little bit about that, just for perspective here. So we are talking about Spring Run Elementary School, and just for you all who have elementary school kids, this parking lot for elementary schools is much smaller than at high schools, and because they're not having to count for student drivers. And what I encountered personally when I drove up around 5:30 was I couldn't even find a place to park. And why is that? It's because you had people who were there, 2.5 hours worth of people who could actually figure out, and you had to park on the grass or anywhere you could find. I think I found a dumpster to park in front of and just hoped I didn't get towed. And there was no place to park. And I remember circling the parking lot multiple times to even find a place. And I thought about, how are voters going to be able to actually find a place before they can even get in line? You have 2.5 hours worth of people in line taking up the parking places because they can't get in and out of the parking, can't get in and out of the precincts to vote. And then I walked in, and that was just a horrific scene. And Tara, I saw you there, and I saw Channel 6 was there actually videoing and filming this tremendous line, as you said, that snaked up and down various hallways into the gymnasium everywhere. And I thought, what is going on? And I went to the front of the line, and I saw at that point they had 3 poll books, but I was told that they just brought the third one like 40 minutes earlier, and this is like 5:30 p.m.
Correct. Yeah.
And my understanding, and because I went through and talked to people in line, they had been waiting there. I asked them, what is your wait time? And they said 2.5 hours. Many of them had left because they were on their lunch break, and they had to come back. I talked to one teacher who was standing in line and said she had teacher conferences all day, and she was trying to come and vote in between her teacher-parent conferences, and said, number one, she could not find parking, and number two, she was trying to work time to go vote in between the time that she had the parent-teacher conferences. Why in the world are we having these teacher-parent conferences and taking up all of this, why are we taking up the time of the teachers and the students? I mean, they should all be voting. Why are we clogging up the parking lots? Now, I have someone that was there that's actually going to come in that is on the line here, so we're going to bring them in. Hi, this is Senator Chase. How are you? Are you there?
Hi. Yeah. Are you bringing in Shannon?
Yes. Is this Shannon?
It is. How are you?
Shannon, thank you so much for calling in. So tell me what you witnessed. Were you one of the ones standing in line?
So, yes, I went to spring run at 7 a.m., was going to vote before my 8 a.m. conference, was obviously not able to do that because it was at least 2 hours at that point. I tried at the conference at 8:30. As a working professional, thank goodness, I had the day off. But I went back at 10:30. You couldn't park the street. They were lined down Springford Parkway in the curb. I finally bit the bullet at 11:30, and so I'm just going to have to stay in line. And I walked out of the door at 2:15.
Wow.
During that time period of being, again, I think she said, snake through the cafeteria, down 2 hallways, the whole length of the school, and then it, made a right down that hallway. And then when you got to, at first I was very excited, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to vote. This is awesome. When I got there and saw 2 check-in people, like when we normally have 3 tables of check-in people, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. But again, hundreds of people would come in and be like, I can't wait, and they would leave. Like personal friends with 3 and 4 kids that I knew were very much a conservative base, or they were working, or they had to go back to work. And again, it seemed very odd that places like Alberta Smith, people were reporting 5-minute wait times. One of the parents that came in there had a parent-teacher conference at Manchester Middle and said there were tons of workers and check-in people and no wait and no lines at all. And then she comes over to Spring Run to vote, and she was like, I can't wait 2 hours here, and she had to leave.
So one thing that I want to encourage you and your friends to do, we do have a mechanism to file complaints, and that's called a voter complaint form. And if you can Google it or you can contact my office, whichever is easiest for you, it's at the Virginia Department of Elections website, and there is a website you can go to and just type in voter complaint form, and it'll pop up. And what you want to do is file that complaint form with the Virginia Department of Elections. That will actually go to the Chesterfield Registrar, and then also report it to RPV, Republican Party of Virginia, because they're filing a lawsuit. And then I mean, definitely send it to my office too, because I sit on Senate Privileges and Elections. We are not going to let this go. What happened was a travesty and a complete disaster that is completely unacceptable. Shannon, thank you so much for calling in today. And,
no, absolutely. And again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist person, but it seems completely illogical that they could not redeploy some of the staff that were sitting there twiddling their thumbs.
Right.
It just seemed also ironic that, and if you, at one point, I think I was, at whatever time, at 2 o'clock when I came out, I looked at my voter number and did the math backwards to get to it. And
Shannon, I don't want to cut you off, but we got to go to a break. You're welcome to come on in 4 minutes.
Worries.
If you want to hang on, we'll get you in 4 minutes.
Process less than $150 an hour, which is crazy.
That is crazy. Shannon, thank you so much for calling in.
Line being held outside, snaked out there in the rain, because apparently, first it was that the scanning machine was not working, but then additionally, two check-in people did not have the thumb drives to verify voter registration. So that's how that started my morning. And then I find out about 7th District ballots being distributed to be voted on in the 4th District. I went over to the Burkdale precinct at Spring Run. Then I was over at one point at Providence Elementary School in the evening to relieve a volunteer. Trying to get into the precinct was backed up all the way down Providence, practically out to Courthouse Road because there was a tow truck. And mind you, this was right after working hours. I think our CCRC run canvas in July was run more effectively. We at least had 3 to 4 poll books for people to come and vote and check in and check their registration. So that was in my opinion. And I understand that
we got that done in 30 days.
There is in my understanding that there is a law. Anytime you have 4,000 registered voters or more, that they're required to have a minimum of 2 poll books. A minimum.
Yes. And 2 scanning machines, I believe, is also
that's right.
Correct. And, I've also had multiple reports of people who, like the lovely lady who called in earlier, people who normally went for their primary vote in June, where they had more than 1 scanning machine, they had less resources this time around for the general election, where they've witnessed time and time again that there was 2 people or 3 people checking in and at least 2 scanning machines, and then suddenly here at the general election, those resources were not available for some reason.
And, that just screams voter repression. I mean, I hate to say that, but it just...
I know. Well, it certainly, when there's that many irregularities, you wonder, is this really strong incompetence or is it something else? I mean, it does beg that question. I agree with you. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That was Tara Carroll, who is the chairwoman of the Chesterfield County Republican Committee, just giving us a report on what she saw on Election Day. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more Cut to the Chase, and Clarabelle Wheeler, who's the first vice chairman, will be on when we come back. Thanks. All right, we're back with more Cut to the Chase with State Senator Amanda Chase. I will be on until the top of the hour. If you have any questions or concerns or would like to report a situation that occurred on Election Day, how was it when you went to vote? Was there a line? The number is 804-454-1366, 804-454-1366. And, I've been getting phone calls, I've been getting emails from constituents saying that they had a difficult time voting on Election Day, having to come back to a voting precinct where they vote multiple times because the line was so long, and trying to come back on multiple attempts unsuccessfully. And I'm concerned, especially in such close races like the one in the 7th Congressional District. It's so important that we're able to get in and out. And so, the question begs, what about no excuse voting? And I want to get your thoughts on how you feel about no excuse voting. Should Election Day be the only day that people are able to vote in an election? Should they wait till Election Day? Right now we have a number of reasons why people can vote with an excuse absentee on Election Day, but there is no excuse voting. One of the bills that I actually co-patroned with Senator Dance this past year was a bill that's called no excuse voting, which means you don't have to have an excuse to vote. And that's the only thing that would change. It's just that there wouldn't be an excuse. You wouldn't have to provide an excuse to vote early. Now, I've talked to some of you, and you're like me. You want people to have to show that identification. That is the current state law, that you have to show some type of ID, picture ID, when you are voting in person. But when you vote absentee, you don't have to show that ID. So there is room for, we're concerned, if you are like I am, that there could be room for fraud. So what I was saying is that, how about no excuse voting if you vote in person absentee? Have no excuse for that part of it. So you still have to go in person to the registrar's office, but maybe you don't have to wait till Election Day, and maybe keep the same. I know that I think it's the 2 Saturdays prior to Election Day, you can actually go in. I think the hours are like 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 5 on the 2 Saturdays before Election Day, and vote in person. So maybe we look at something more like that. But I am interested in your opinion. What do we do? I mean, I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to vote, but I also want to make sure it's a secure process in which people are having to present a picture ID. I've heard of instances in Henrico County where the person was showing the driver's license, but the poll worker was not, the election official did not check to see if they were even in the poll books, and that there were a number of people that happened to. So, we need to make sure that if you see or hear something, that you report that and file a complaint with the Virginia Department of Elections. And you can go to apps.elections.virginia.gov, and you're thinking, I'm not going to remember that. So you just type in voter complaint form, or type in Virginia State Board of Elections. Any of those words will get you to where you need to be. But it's important that we document if you had any trouble or issues on Election Day, then we want you to report that to your State Board of Elections so that we can look into that. And sitting on Senate Privileges and Elections, I will make sure that we take a look at this, because we want to make sure that you're able to find easy, accessible parking, and that you can get in and out and vote in a relatively convenient fashion that doesn't take 2.5 hours in line. So definitely let your voice be heard. And as I mentioned earlier, Constance Tyler, who is the Chesterfield County Registrar, who attributed the problems to the large number of voters, has agreed to come on the air with me next Friday and kind of give her perspective. Constance was the deputy Chesterfield County Registrar for many years under the direction of Larry Hakey, who was the original registrar. So we did have a little bit of a change in leadership there, but we also had just an incredible turnout on Election Day. So anyway, again, the number here in the studio is 804-454-1366, 804-454-1366, and let us know what you saw on Election Day. And Dr. Clarabelle Wheeler, the first vice chair of the Virginia State Board of Elections, she's just sent me a text and said she's stuck in a meeting right now, so it may be next week before she is able to make it on the show. But we'll be on the air until the top of the hour, and hopefully she'll have an opportunity to call in and let us know what's going on. This has been an interesting week. Right after the election, next year I run for office. My term is 4 years, and this will be my first time running for re-election next year. And so I've already begun gearing up. I started my campaign kickoff back in June of this past year, And the General Assembly cannot actually raise money during session, which is this year will be January and February. So we have to be forward thinking, which I've done, and had a number of fundraisers. We unfortunately have to have money to run for office, and so I'm right now in the process of having my final fundraiser in conjunction with the Grand Illumination in downtown Richmond, and you're welcome to reach out to my office if you're interested in participating in that. There will be a family event in addition to one in the evening. Both will be in the evening, and it'll be centered around the Grand Illumination. So feel free to contact my campaign office for that. So 2019 session is going to be on the minds of a lot of people, including myself. I've already begun to file legislation for the upcoming 2019 session. I will, as I do every year, I file my term limit legislation because I do believe in term limits. I believe you have a term limit of 12 years in the House, 12 years in the Senate max. And, we don't want to empower our bureaucracy. And we've seen that has happened in Florida when there's too short of a term limit on these folks. And then you don't want the bureaucracy to run the General Assembly. But enough time for someone to get in there and to learn the position and to be effective, but not to make a career of being in elected office, and that eventually they would, I think anytime you do something for a long period of time, it lends itself to burnout, and we need fresh new ideas and after a certain period of time. So I will be reintroducing my term limit legislation. I will also be reintroducing legislation that would require anyone running for governor to live under 2 governor's term periods, so a period of 4 years times 2, 8 years, before they can run for governor. And that's just to ensure that we have folks that are vested in Virginia, not folks that are coming here simply to make Virginia to be a political stepping stone for them. We don't want that. We want people that really invest in Virginia and are vested in Virginia. So I'm submitting that legislation. You'll also see a lot of my transparency legislation, which transparency is very important to me, and keeping our government accountable, but also when people run for office. And if you look at our constitutional officers, and if you noticed on your ballot when you were voting on Tuesday, there was no political indication by the Constitutional Office of Commonwealth's Attorney. And so I want to change that law so that if a candidate wants to indicate whether they are a Democrat or a Republican, because a lot of times they will run and achieve they will become the nominee for a particular party, I think that we would want them as constituents to be able to have that label in there, because I want to know the political stripe of people running. And I think that's very important as far as transparency is concerned. I ran that bill last year, and it made it out of the Senate, but died in the House. So I'm going to work to get some more support for that, because I just think it's important that you as a voter know what the political stripe is of those who are running. In addition, we've talked a lot on the show about economic development authorities, and my desire to ensure that we have accountability for the economic development authorities who currently have the ability to enter into leases, buy purchase bonds, and basically act as a government with very little accountability to our elected Board of Supervisors. I want to ensure that we have proper checks and balances in place where there is currently not. So we're going to be looking at doing some type of JLARC study to ensure that we are holding the economic development authorities accountable. Stay tuned. We'll be back with the final segment of Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase.
Lately, I've been losing sleep.
All right, welcome back to the final segment of Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. This is our weekly town hall and radio show. And on the final segment, one piece of legislation that I'd like to highlight, I will begin by telling you that last night I served on a panel with several of my other colleagues, Senators Glenn Sturdivant, Senator Siobhan Dunavant, and Senator Jennifer McClellan, along with Dr. Makola Abdullah, who's the president of Virginia State University, and along with Brett Vassey, who is the president and CEO of the Virginia Manufacturers Association. And we were asked to participate in a town hall called The Price Tag of Higher Education by the Partners for College Affordability and Public Trust. And folks were invited to come and attend this town hall and to join the conversation on rising college costs and student debt and their impact on Virginia's students, families, and businesses. As a mom of 4 teenage kids, next year I will have 3 kids in college. If anybody understands the importance of the affordability of college, it is me and my family. And one of the things that irritates me is that whenever these colleges and universities have a tuition increase, that there is no opportunity for the parents or the students to have any type of say on the Board of Visitors. And so I am considering very seriously filing a bill that would basically prohibit governing boards of each public institution of higher education, so like the Board of Visitors, before they could increase an undergraduate tuition or mandatory fees, they would have to have student and public input. There would have to be a public comment period at a board meeting at least 30 days prior to any vote on such an increase. I just think that there needs to be more accountability, and it's too easy for our colleges and universities to simply raise tuition and to raise fees, and especially the state universities is what I'm talking about. So that is legislation that I am working on, that I'm working with the Partners for College Affordability and Public Trust on. One thing that I would encourage you to know, we're in the final segment of Cut to the Chase. There's a lot of legislation. I sit on the Senate subcommittee for higher education, and we had about 20 to 30 bills addressing anything from rate increases to rate freezes. I'm talking about tuition rate freezes, a number of different bills that were out there. And one of those had to do with passport credits. How frustrating is it whenever your student goes to a community college, takes these classes, and then they won't transfer to a 4-year college or university? And then sometimes we just feel like, well, it's wasted money. You want to make sure that if you're going to take these classes, or even kids who are doing the dual enrollment. I know my oldest daughter did dual enrollment whenever she was at Cosby High School, and we need to make sure that if kids are going to go to the trouble and have those harder classes and take the time, energy, and effort to take the college-level classes, that they get credit for it. So, that's just very important. We want to make sure that transfers over. So the good news is that we had a passport bill that passed this past year, and that's really good. And then also guaranteed admissions agreements. That was passed into law this past year. So if you get an associate's degree, either while you're in high school through dual enrollment or out after you've graduated, you can get guaranteed admissions into a baccalaureate public university. So we do some good things here in the General Assembly. Listen, we're almost out of time here. I want to thank you for tuning in today. Next week, we'll continue the discussion about incongruities that took place in the last election and talk about my legislation for next year. Until next Friday, stay tuned.